debate, which just ruined the Republicans, like, any ambitions of working with Obama in the first place. Then we always get this topic about, like, oh yeah, we got those bad bankers out of Wall Street, ladies and gentlemen. Well, last time I checked, the stimulus package only fired the CEOs. And in fact, the stimulus package helped those bad banks stay in business. And last time I checked, all the evil bankers who weren't the CEOs are still getting paid. And guess what? They're getting paid by the government. Last time I checked, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, by passing a stimulus package, kept the bad bankers, the people who got us into the situation, kept the bad banks, and have continued to make the economy worse. And I guarantee you will probably see something worse coming out of these banks later in the life of the United States. Finally, I want to touch on the spending argument before I go into my substantive. I think the spending argument, like, oh, the deficit is bad, is a wash on both sides of the table. Here's why. So in the United States, we have mandatory and discretionary spending. Like, mandatory is any entitlement that we've promised to somebody. So every year we have to spend that. It's automatically calculated in the budget. Discretionary spending is everything else, from like US Army, Marines, Air Force, EPA, any government agency, anything else, right, ladies and gentlemen? If we cut everything out of the United States government budget that was discretionary spending and only paid for entitlements, we would still be in a deficit by a few, I think something like 20 billion, I have it written down. Yeah, $20 billion, ladies and gentlemen. So like, no one's gonna stand up. No politician from either side is gonna be like, all right, let's cut everything that's discretionary. So both sides are gonna increase the deficit no matter what until we really have a rethink of how government works. So like, now I wanna get into my main point of debate. So here's the false dichotomy that's created by the US political system. We have this side of the House that says, you know, Barack Obama's not the perfect president, but he's been pretty okay. But like, if you don't vote for him, you get this guy, which is worse. Then we get this side of the House that's like, look, Mitt Romney's not perfect, but you know, like, at least we don't have to get that guy, right? At the end of the day, I think it's ridiculous that as a US citizen, when I go to the voting booth every single time, well, I'm only 20, so like the first time, but when, you know, when I've been, when I follow politics, right? Whenever I look back on an election, I'm like, man, I didn't like either one of those candidates. In fact, I usually spend my time like thinking about which person will do the least amount of damage to the United States, like a greater or a lesser of two evils type thing. And I think it's ridiculous that in a two-party system, right, we have to sit there in the polling booth and go, man, I don't agree with either one of these guys, but I definitely don't agree with that guy, even though I kind of don't agree with this guy. And I think it gets even, one second, Walt, I'll take you a second. So what I think is even more ridiculous is that they polarize the politics, and I'll go into that in a second when I talk about why the two-party system in the United States is messed up. Let's go ahead, Walt.
Do you vote in party primaries?
Yes, and I'm going to talk about, because I asked you this question earlier, I'm going to get on to open primaries in a second. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's why here's like the two-party system fails, and why the U.S. needs a multi-party system to take away like financial budgets and everything. So there's 5 reasons. First, it divides Americans on fundamental issues that become undebatable. So let's look for an example at abortion, right? Back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, it was okay to have a conversation about abortion in the U.S. until the parties took it over and made it political. Now it's almost impossible to have an abortion debate with a pretty good debate, like as a discourse, without having like someone screaming at your face. I think it's ridiculous that the parties in the United States have divided Americans to 2 extremes. I think it's ridiculous as a guy who kind of believes in like right-wing policies when it comes to like economics, but is a massive social lefty. So for example, I believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe in certain things like maybe people should have health care, and I believe in like some other things. But when I'm sitting like in the back in my polling booth, right, I'm like, okay, so I can either vote for the Democrats on social issues, or I can vote for the Republicans on right-wing issues. There's no party except for the Libertarian Party who says that you can have it all, ladies and gentlemen. What I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that it creates a false dichotomy for a number of reasons. So first of all, it divides Americans on fundamental issues. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to start going even faster. Second of all, it fails to rectify fundamental problems. We voted, no, I've got to go, I'm sorry. So it fails to rectify fundamental issues. Like Walt's like, oh, but we get in there and we compromise. That's not true. We elect a guy who does extreme policies for a number of years. Then we elect another guy who either repeals those or keeps some of them, does a number of extreme policies here, and we just keep going back and forth on extremes. That doesn't create a rational middle. It doesn't create the situation good enough for a compromise. And ladies and gentlemen, if you've been frustrated with the last 4 years, like why we don't see compromise, that's why. It's not because the Republicans are a bunch of douchebags, right? Third of all, I think that the two-party system benefits financial groups. The reason we see so much money in the political system is because they know exactly who to support. It's like, we're going to give all of our money to the Republicans, or we're going to give all of our money to the Democrats. I think that a multi-party system like spreads out the financial thing. It gives more voice to the people. Finally, I think this is the most important point, and as I'm like on 8 minutes now, I'll try to wrap it up, Alex. Okay, cool, sweet, best friends, nice. I think that because like the two-party systems don't represent the people for a number of reasons, and here's the main one. the US has a very weird political ideology. So you have the Republicans who are like, you know, I think the government is not responsible enough to handle economic issues, but they're totally responsible enough to dictate social issues to everyone in the United States. Then you have the Democrats who are like, I totally think the US government is responsible enough to handle economic issues, but I totally don't think they're responsible enough to do anything along the lines of social issues. Like, we should never, like, you know, try to impede on someone's right to make a type of choice. I think that, like, leaves out any rational middle ground. Like, I think most of us can see the goods and bads of both parties, but at the end of the day, we're forced to vote with an extreme. And I think that doesn't make us not represent the people. I think if I'm like a person who runs as a Democrat or a Republican, and I maybe don't have the same views as all of my party like people, I'm still going to be forced to vote on things in Congress that I don't agree with, because at the end of the day, they're going to threaten me with taking all my money away. Ladies and gentlemen, the reason I want you to throw your vote away, or to vote for, or go and find a candidate, whether communist, libertarian, Justice Party, Green Party, Republican, or Democrat, I want you to vote for the person that you believe in, whether or not he will win. Because I don't think we'll ever actually get hope and change in our political system until we have a system that's actually representative of the people and not representative of big financial businesses and not representative of the far extremes on both sides of the issue. I don't think we'll ever have a rational middle government until people get out of this false dichotomy that I have to vote for a winner. No, at the end of the day, you should not be voting for a winner. It's not like you're gambling. You're voting for something that you truly believe in, whether or not you're going to win, ladies and gentlemen. So at the end of the day, I ask you, throw your vote away. If you really believe that Barack Obama is the best candidate that we can get from the United States, even though the damning stuff we've heard about him all night and the damning stuff we've heard about Mitt Romney, go ahead and vote for him. If you like Mitt Romney, please go ahead and vote for him. But if you're like me and you find yourself voting for the lesser of two evils every time you go into a voting box in like the United States, please throw your vote away and vote for someone you actually believe in, because that's the only way we'll ever get enough political capital behind another party or behind another individual to actually see real change in the US government. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you. I know I took like a little bit extra time. I'm sorry, Alex. Sorry.